Now what I'd like to do is take a deeper dive into the architecture of the D70. What you have on this screen here is the user set. And these are 5 different sounds that you can access, but each one of these actually contains more than the one sound that is highlighted here. For example, grandioso. If you go to the part section, you can actually see that there are a total of 5 parts. Part 1, which plays on the keyboard, is the grandioso. Part 2 is another keyboard sound. Part 3 is strings. Part 4 is dual clav. Part 5 is prologue. So you've got a total of 5 different sounds. The sounds that aren't played on the keyboard are accessed through MIDI. And then you've also got a rhythm section as well, which is on dedicated channel 10. This collection of 5 sounds plus rhythm is called a performance. And you can access 8 different performances in one bank, and there are 8 banks. The performances also are where you program in your effects, your reverb and delay and chorus. Now if we select patch, the grandioso sound here, you can see consists of 2 different sounds: a acoustic piano P2, which is pianissimo, and the acoustic piano F2, or the forte. And as I mentioned previously, those are mixed, and the threshold is 64 numerical value for the velocity to bring in the second sound. On this screen here, I can adjust the volume, the level, the velocity curve, the velocity sensitivity, the key mode, in this case it's layer as opposed to split, and then I can assign the split point. If I look at just the first tone, I can change the sound by changing to a different tone. I can adjust the level of that tone. I can shift its pitch in semitones. I can go down 2 octaves, up 2 octaves. I can fine-tune it. Then I can adjust the filter cutoff. I can adjust the resonance, the attack and the release of that tone. And then I can also turn on and off any reverb or chorus. I can assign its pan, and I can turn off the tone if I prefer, and also give it the keyboard range. With these tone palette sliders, I can make adjustments in the volume level, the pan, the tuning, the cutoff, resonance, attack and release quite easily. So here, if I select tone display, you can see the sliders here will adjust the different volume levels of the 4 different possible tones for a patch. At this patch level, the filter, resonance, attack, release, all those parameters just make modifications of tones that are stored in memory. But I can go one level deeper by selecting the tone level. And this is where the synthesis really takes place. Here you can see I can have the tone name here, and I can select different tones. Right now the original media or the sampled waveform bank that it's come is I1, which is the acoustic sounds. But I could select I2, which would be the synthesized sounds, or 3, which would be the drum sounds. And if I stay with the original acoustic sound bank, I go down to number, you can see acoustic piano is the first sound. I can select different pianos. I can go to the organs. I can select guitar. Strings and so forth. So that's how you select the different original sampled waveforms to start doing synthesis. There's also this section here called DLM. I haven't found that to be very helpful at all. What it does is that you can select a portion of a waveform and determine its start point and loop it and create different sounds, but generally all you get is noise. So I have not done hardly anything with that. Okay, if we go to pitch, here you can see you've got coarse pitch, and you've got fine pitch, and then you've got the keyboard follow, the pitch tracking. So that's 100%, but if I decrease it, you've got 0. Doesn't do anything, or anything in between that. You can also go in reverse as well. And then you've got the envelope key follow. So what that does is you can adjust how the envelope follows the tracking of the keyboard. So for example, at the higher end of the keyboard versus the lower, I have it at 0% right now, but if I go up to 100%, 150%, the lower portion has a longer decay and the upper portion is very short. I can also go down to minus 100% to reverse that. It's more apparent on some other patches than this one here. And then this is that DLM function. I always leave that off. But you have an attack and release envelope here for pitch. So right now it's turned off, but let's say I add a depth of plus 12 and an attack of 9. Or you can also do the release. If we select the filter, first parameter that comes up is the filter type. So we can select the low pass, high pass, band pass, or we can even bypass the filter. The bypassing the filter sometimes is helpful when you're using acoustic sounds. And then the filter cutoff can be adjusted here. We could add resonance. Adjust the velocity curve and the tracking for the filter so that we can make it brighter as you go up the keyboard. Then we have the envelope depth. This adjusts the amount of modulation by the envelope of the filter. And we can also modulate the filter with velocity. The time of the keyboard follow for the envelope can be adjusted here so that The attack and decay could be shortened as you go up the keyboard. And also you can use an adjustment on velocity here for shortening the attack and decay with a faster velocity. And also release velocity can be adjusted here, and not very many synthesizers have that parameter. And then when you go into this window here, you have a graphic representation of the envelope, and it's a expanded envelope with 2 sustain and 2 decay parameters. So you've got the first decay time and the first sustain level, and then you got the second decay time and the second sustain level. So as I adjust this here, you can see how the envelope graphically changes, and then your release. And then when you get to the amplifier, you've got the volume level you can adjust, the velocity curve, the velocity sensitivity, and also your keyboard follow time. So the faster you, or the higher you go up the keyboard, the faster the velocity and the faster the attack and decay can be. And then you can also adjust that with the velocity as well, and release velocity. And then you've got the same type of several stage envelope as you did with the filter. And again, a graphic representation of it. And finally, you have a low frequency oscillator. You've got one LFO with a sine wave, square wave, saw, and random. And you can adjust the rate, the delay time, the rise time. You can also offset it. And then you also can assign that to modulate pitch, modulate the filter, or modulate the amplitude. And you can also bring these things in with a foot pedal so that they don't come automatically. Here I'd like to demonstrate some of the different sounds that you can create when you get into the tone level and start to make adjustments in the original sampled waveforms. So here's a sound that has multiple sawtooth waveforms. It has this one. When you put it all together, and then this is a square wave synth sound. Again, it's 2 sounds, that one and that sound. And then there's this polysynth sound. These are kind of the sounds that you would create on a regular analog synth. Yeah, I failed to mention that in the section at the tone level, you can actually invert the envelope, which is what I've done here. Kind of a mellow digital sound. A brighter digital sound. And then some combination sounds sort of a pizzicato and a bell, and then a bell flute. A bell horn. And then I've created some sounds using the resonance at the point of self-oscillation where it becomes a sound source. Again, these are techniques that are routinely done on strictly analog synthesizers. And then we've got some synthesized harp sounds. When you play around with the velocity switching, you can create some really interesting layered sounds. And then you've got the ability to make classic sweep sounds on analog synths like the Juno 60. Really nice filters. And then here's a sound called Ethereal, which actually was a factory patch on a Juno 60. Here's a few more solo sounds. Yes, you have portamento as well, which you can program. This is a square bass, similar to what you can do on a Juno 60. But you've also got the acoustic bass sounds. Here's a bass sound just made from a sawtooth waveform sample. And then a wet bass sound. Velocity sensitive, of course. In this bank I have a number of sweep sounds. Here's a bandpass filter sweep. And this sound is made from a triangle waveform sample. And then this is the Jupiter 8 pulse width modulation string sound through a bandpass filter. So the bottom end is attenuated, but it brings out the highs really nicely. And then this is a double sweep. High pass filter sweep. This is reminiscent of a sound that I created on a Jupiter 6. Then you can add modulation with the LFO. Here's a bank of just some of the raw waveforms. This first one is the square wave. And then this one here, on this sound here, I have 4 different waveform samples combined, but I'm going to isolate just the first one, and this is the square wave. Now, since you can't adjust the pulse width because it's a sample, what they did was they sampled in different pulse width square waves. So you have this one, then this one, which is narrower, a little bit more narrow. That. So you've got 4 different pulse widths of the waveform sample. And that's all 4 combined. And then here's the pulse waveform through a bandpass filter. And then a wet pluck. A classic sound from a Juno 60. And then a saw pluck. Saw pulse. And then a sound similar to what you can get on a Juno 60 when you use the sub-oscillator. This sound, and there's your sub-oscillator. this bank I've just got some sort of sound effects that I created using some of the different parameters in the tone section. So you've got a random modulation of a bell sound. And then surf, just with white noise. With some keyboard tracking for the filter. And then this sound here, I use the keyboard tracking of the pitch to decrease the amount of tracking so that it creates a bell tree. There's a number of noise samples that you can play with. And in a lot of synthesizers, this patch called initial, which is usually a sawtooth. Then you have the rhythm section, the drum kit, and you know, it has pretty decent drum sounds. I'll demonstrate that going down the keyboard. So it's amazing how versatile this synthesizer is. If you know how to go into the tone section and tweak the different parameters, you can create sounds that sound like a lot of analog sounds on, for example, the Juno 60 and the Jupiter 8, but you've also got the digital waveforms as well as the acoustic sounds. Given the choice, I'd much rather have one of these than a Jupiter 8, or certainly more than a Juno 60, particularly when you consider the price. You can pick one of these up for as little as $200 or anywhere up to $800, depending on the condition. The one thing you need to be aware of is that the key bed is notorious for having keys that don't trigger, and it requires removing the key bed out, removing all the keys, cleaning the contacts, and adding a silver conductive coating to the carbon contacts. And once you've done that, you'll never have a problem with it again. I've done that to 2 different D70s. Numerous PCM cards are available to expand the number of waveforms. Super acoustic guitar is spectacular. Then you've got the string section and ethnic, orchestral, organ sounds, sound effects, and you can get RAM cards to double the amount of memory.